sure that came on. Yeah. Raise this thing up. Good. Yeah. Good to be here this morning. And on this fine Easter. It is a beautiful day here, sun shining, nice cool day, and I hope that everyone's had a good Easter. Easter's almost over for most people, except us here in the west and on to the west coast. But it's been a wonderful year, and I was thinking a lot about the resurrection, and I thought, every pulpit in the world, Easter morning, has something to say about the resurrection, and they prove it with facts and with scriptures and with all sorts of things. And I would just like to say, I know there's been a resurrection, and I don't have to prove it. It's in me. I know who I am. I know what's happened to me. And I don't have to try to go back into historical facts to prove a resurrection. I just have to feel it, understand it, and emotionally know that it's happened in me. That's the main thing. And a lot of people say, well, I don't know the scriptures, and I don't know the quotes, and I don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, that's fine. If you can't picture a man getting up out of the grave, that's fine. If you can't picture him coming out of the tomb, resurrecting after a death and a burial and after a cruel crucifixion, if you can't picture that, then know what's going on inside you. That'll all come later. That's all history anyway. But there is a real spirit that is very much alive, and the spirit that resurrected that body has resurrected us. So this morning I wanted to take just a little bit of time and discuss a functional understanding, functional body, a functional understanding of our consciousness. And if we can understand that, we can begin to understand the resurrection of all things. I wanted to read a scripture, and the scripture is found in John 12 and verse 23. It says, "And Jesus answered them." He was talking with Philip. Many of them, they brought Greeks to Jesus. They wanted to meet him. And so Jesus answered them, saying, "The hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit." So Jesus, when they said they wanted to see Jesus, Jesus let them know that seeing him in that body wasn't all that important, but he would meet with them if they wanted to meet. However, if they really wanted to see the Christ and see the resurrection and see what was real, then understand this, except a corn of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone. Keep that in mind as we go through here. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. Let's go all the way back to Genesis 15. I think it's verse 4. And the Spirit is speaking with Abraham. And it says, Behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir. Abraham in the 15th chapter was worried about he didn't have any children, and that Eliezer, a servant of his, was going to end up being his heir. And the word of the Lord comes to him and said, That's not going to be so. But he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. Now just think about that for a minute. Nothing outside of you is your heir, but it's what comes forth from inside you that is your heir. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward the heaven, and tell the stars if thou art able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. So, Abraham, there's going to be an enormous amount, an innumerable amount of people coming out of you, of attributes coming out of you. Then Paul comes over in the 10th chapter of Hebrews, and he says, For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with those sacrifices, all those things that the law had them sacrifice, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually make the comers thereunto perfect. So nothing about the law, as many things as you might try to do with things outside of you, bullocks and lambs and meal offerings and burnt offerings and all kinds of things that you might try to do outside of you, none of it will perfect you. But it's what comes from the inside. When you're continually going to the outside, you're not perfected. But there is something that happens from the inside that perfects you. He goes on, For then would they not have ceased to been offered. If something would have perfected them, they wouldn't have needed to keep doing it. Because that the worshipers, listen to him closely, the worshipers once purged should have no more conscience of sin. I guess most of the people in the message and third that they're not purged yet, since they still have. I have no conscience of sin. I just don't. But in those sacrifices, there is a remembrance, again, made of sins every year. Every time they make a move they don't think they should have made, their conscience brings them guilty, and they feel like they have sinned and need forgiveness and need to have a mediator and an intercessor and all these kinds of things. So Paul is very clear here, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sin. Nothing outside of you will take away your sin. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he saith, when he comes into the world, he saith, Sacrifice and offerings thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. So how did he get past all the sacrifices and all the offerings and all the things outside and all the ways that man was trying to keep himself where he didn't have a guiltiness about him or sin? How did it come about that we came to a point that we don't have any more conscience of sin? Sacrifice and offerings thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. So there is a body, and that body is sinless. That body brings us to a conscience of no sin. I'm going to read you a little something from the Wisdom of Solomon. It's not the Song of Solomon, it's the Wisdom of Solomon. There are books that Solomon wrote, which I have studied through them and looked at them, and they're wonderful things. But in the Wisdom of Solomon, 19 and verse 18, it says, For the elements were changed. Now let me give you just an idea of who he's talking about and where he's talking. Solomon's looking back at when they came out of Egypt. And Solomon is talking about the way they came out of Egypt, the things that happened, and all the changes that were made. And he says in the Wisdom of Solomon, he says, for the elements were changed in themselves by a kind of harmony. Like as in a psaltery, notes change, the name of the tune changes, and yet are always certain sounds, which may well be perceived by the sight of the things that have been done. So wisdom is the wisdom of Solomon. He's very clearly saying, look, things change coming out of Egypt. And he goes on, and there's his long list of things that he lists out, but he talks about the earth brought forth flies that had never been. The earth brought forth lice that had never been. These were things that had not been on the earth. The earth elements changed to bring those things forth, and they changed by the word of Moses, is what he says, and by his staff. So he lets us see that as we go through seasons, the elements will change in themselves by a kind of harmony. Moses, in harmony with the Spirit, in sync with the earth, could speak the word, and the earth would bring forth whatever he wanted it to bring forth. It would bring forth, and it was for the deliverance. And he says that these things were all in tune, just as a psaltery, just as an orchestra is playing, and everything comes in tune little by little by little. First starts out in the first stanza, you may hear the violins, and in the second stanza you hear the percussions, and in the third stanza the dominant thing is maybe the horns, and it keeps changing and changing, so that by the time the exposition is finished, you have heard all of them, and then in the end it comes out to what's called a grand finale, where all of them play wide open, and you're getting the full effects of the orchestra and of the exposition. Now each one of the stanzas have a little end thing, but it's just a little small thing. After Paul, Irenaeus, Martin, Columba, Luther, Wesley, Brother Branham called it an exposition of the seven church ages. It was a musical, an orchestrate. And so they had their little finale at the end of each age, and then at the end of the ages, it was a massive grand finale. So here we are. We're all the way past the end of the ages. We're no longer looking outside for anything about what we need. We're looking inside. We're turning inward. And we'll talk about that consciousness. So the world is celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ today, all across the world. For the last 24 hours, they've been celebrating, actually since Good Friday, when he was crucified. And then today he's resurrected. They've been celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ today. And today is April 17th, and the celebration parade of the planets, which we talked about before, and their orbits have completed their glory in the heavens, and that alignment is beginning to break up now. And that's not a coincidence that all this is happening on the same day. So the celebration parade of the planets and orbits has completed its glory in the heavens, and it's truly a resurrection. And just as all the saints resurrected in Christ Jesus, raising the consciousness of the universe, it is happening again. The consciousness of the universe. Say, how many times has this happened, Brother Parnell? Well, if you go back and you just follow history, and you follow civilization, and you follow books and parchments and everything else have been written, you can take it all the way back to about 1,300,000 years that humanity has been on the earth in some form, whether it's spoken word or whatever it might be, but they've been on the earth and in the earth acting as humanity for about 1,300,000 years. You can figure that one rotation around the earth, the zodiac, the 12 houses, and the earth's rotation, one complete rotation is about 26,000 years. So 10 of those would be 260,000. And 4 of those would be about 1,000,000. So that would be 40. And then another 300,000. You can figure we're in 50-some retroactive turns around the earth. So this is our somewhere between 50 and 60th celebration. They can track the planets and the heavens and the orbits and everything else all the way back to the very beginning of the Big Bang, whatever they call it. So we have all this going on, and what a resurrection this is. We are in the celebration of it right now, out of dead denominationalism. So humanity has come through about between 50 and 60 of these resurrections, about 55 or something like that. And as we travel through, it's like a spiral. And you keep traveling, and it spirals as you travel around the sun and in the universe and all those things. It's a spiral formation. And so we have come through all of this, and each time that we've come through every one of the houses, we learn and embed certain attributes about ourselves in each of those houses and in us. So we see this resurrection out of dead denominationalism into a newfound land, raising the universe once again. It's happening all around us. Vibration, frequency, all sorts of things are happening around us, and it's changing the very molecular structure of the earth and everything about it. And the universe, and science knows that. So we see this, it's the rising of the sun, it's shalom. Brother Branham called it the invisible union, the home of the heavenly bridegroom and the earthly bride. He calls it all these things, heaven and earth kissing one another, the spirit and the earth connected and bringing forth its attribute. When the spirit and the earth connected, what attribute did they bring forth? What was the main attribute that came forth when heaven and earth connected with one another? Humanity. And the separation is over, and we have reconciled all things unto ourselves. And so we have all this going on. There's no schism in the earth. Between the earth and the spirit, there's no schism. They are working in harmony. Just like I read you, Solomon said it all moves in harmony. Whatever happens, whatever the earth brings forth, it's like a orchestra. It's like an exposition. And as the words are spoken, they just keep coming forth and bringing things forth out of the earth. There's no schism in the earth and the spirit. We have found the secret of diversity in oneness. We have found out that we will never be the same. Nothing will ever be the same. No two snowflakes are the same. Nothing is ever the same. We're not looking for sameness. We found the secret of diversity in oneness. There will always be diversity, never sameness, always oneness. So we see this going on, and we're starting to begin to accept and understand that the Spirit is moving in all things. That quickening Spirit that quickened us from the dead, that quickened Christ from the dead, that got him up out of that tomb, that same Spirit is moving in us and keeping the earth and everything in perfect harmony. Now, we know that Jesus, he said in St. John 3, I believe it was, he said, no man has descended from heaven. no man has ascended into heaven save he that descended from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. So Jesus was working off of the understanding of descent and ascension. And today, for just a little while, I want to talk about this functional conscience within us and how we can overcome all these feelings of, gee, these things aren't right. Things aren't working right. Things aren't going right. We can overcome all these feelings. In the concept of descent, followed by an ascent, because that's what Jesus said. He said that he first descended and then ascended. So in the concept of descent followed by ascent, processes take on shape. This is straight, this is a study of the universe. The whole universe is set up on what I'm talking about here. Not only humanity, not only your body, but the entire universe. Every planet, every star, everything, gravity right on down the line is all set up the same. So, in the concept of descent followed by ascent, processes take shape and become something we can describe. Before it goes through a descent, you can't even describe what it is. It is an abstract. And as it descends, it's descending dimensionally in order to get into a dimension where it can take form. It's a life. And that life has to descend until it comes to a dimension where it begins to take shape and take form. So, the concept of descent followed by ascent, processes take on shape and become something we can describe. We move beyond the abstract. We were abstract before. In the universal pattern, the processes of fall and rise must operate according to law. So the moment that you begin to try to form yourself, to try to shape yourself, and we begin to descend through the dimensional things until we can actually take on a form and a shape, as that is taking place, the processes of fall and ascent must operate according to law. That's why we have moved through the processes of law. Once the ascent is accomplished, once you've done your descent and you're coming back in the ascent, or you're bringing everything up to your identity, to your consciousness, to your level of understanding, once the ascent is accomplished, the law no longer has power or effect in the process. So once you have descended into shape and into form, which is what you did, you descended from theophany into humanity and took on shape and form. Once you descended into shape and form, the life of the process moves at free will. That's why you heard me the last few times people ask me, what's free will? You mean we're not predestinated, we're not elected? I never said that. I said we're predestinated. When we're in theophany, we're predestinated to the earth. And when we get to the earth, we elect a piece of earth to get into. We went through predestination and election. I do believe in it. But once you have descended, taken on shape and form, you move into free will. That's the universe. And we are completely aligned with the universe. The life of the process is free will. This is the universal way of growth. He that ascended first descended. Jesus Christ followed the universal law to set us free. Nothing's out of sync. Everything's in perfect order. The complete universal law was followed during the time of descent and ascent. Exactly the way that molecular structure and science says that it goes on molecularly, and it's going on spiritually with us also. He that ascended first descended, Jesus Christ, followed the universal law to set us free. That is resurrection. And resurrection, death, burial, and resurrection is happening all the time. Except the corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. That's the universal law. And we had to follow universal law in the descent. Apply that to humanity, and you will understand the universal chaos that is loosed in humanity during the time of descent. Because everything is moving by law, and it moves everything into chaos. And when it does, universal chaos is loosed in humanity during the times of descent. Also, we can understand the stability and the organization and the greater understanding that follows the descent. When we come into ascension, we begin to rise, and we begin to bring all of the rest of the dimensional things that we have formed and shaped, we begin to bring it up to our level of consciousness, and it is a resurrection. It is rising. Organization and greater understanding follows the descent. Don't worry. Christ the universe, we are growing and enhancing ourselves. In my search to understand the dissension process, which I went in and took a good look at it, and I always try to keep the whole intellectual, I try to keep my words in a way that you understand them. I try to keep my intellect in a way that it moves in the revelation, instead of just quoting what a scientist said or what whoever might have said. So in my search to understand the dissension process, there are steps devolving into descent. And that pattern is a pattern of the universe. That's why you see a lot of chaos sometimes, because the universe is in a pattern of devolving, of shrinking. And then it goes into a pattern of expansion, rising. And so we see this now. Humanity and the individual move in the same pattern as the universe. The humanity, the earth, the individual, all things. As it is going in a descent, he that ascends first has to descend. As it's going in a descent, you lose unity and you move into division. And you wonder why it happened to us. Because we have followed the way of the universe, and we lost our unity and broke up into millions and millions of separate parts, broke up into all kinds of ages, dispensations, and everything else, and all kinds of nations and all kinds of individuals and all kinds of everything else. We lose that unity to division. The second thing you do is you lose the certainty of what you are, who you are, the certainty. You lose that certainty, and you lose it to uncertainty. You're not sure. I remember reading a lot of Luther's and Wesley's things, and they were saying they just prayed by the grace of God that they were saved, that they weren't lost, and they had done so many things in life, even after they claimed to be Christian, that they should be lost, and they were uncertain about who they were. Fifth and sixth church age messengers. And so you lose in the descent, you lose a certain amount of uncertainty. Loss of free will. You lose that free will, and it goes into law and limitations. This devolving takes place in the science. This devolving takes place in photons, electrons, and protons. And so in the descent, we lose this unity and become unpredictable, and therefore lose our free will to perform free will because we need law to hold us in obedience during a descent. Otherwise, we go into complete chaos. The planets will begin to strike one another. Everything under the sun will go into total chaos. So we need that law in the time of descent when we're totally uncertain of who we are and what we are. The descent changes the mix of elements, the minerals, the botany life, the animals, the humans. The descent changes them. It does. They begin to die. They begin to do all these things. So during the descent, predetermination and electives become very important. And what became very important to all of us during our descent? Predestination and election. We've been predestinated. We've been elected. We didn't know how to apply it. We applied it the best we could. But in all things, during the descent, predetermination and electives become very important due to the loss of unity. You're trying to, in all honesty, you're trying to stay alive. You're trying to survive, and you can't identify with anything hardly. In the descent, becomes very important due to the loss of unity, certainty, you're very uncertain, and the loss of free will. So what I want to make this simple. The earth, and we're talking the earth now, the body of the Spirit. We know that we've taught it a zillion times, the Holy Spirit is a live being, and the earth is its body. It is a moving part of the living Spirit. The earth, the body of the Spirit, began a descent in the attribute of humanity. A period of growth. Anytime there is a descent, you fall into a period of growth. This changed the mix of our elements. When the descent of humanity was finished in Christ, we began our ascent, which we will talk further about. Regain our unity. We regain our certainty. We have a certain sound. We have a certain thing. We know who we are. We regain our free will. We're not trying to walk by predestination or election. We regain all these things through the ascension process. We are the universe, perfectly aligned and growing all the time. And we're moving through the very functions of the universe all the time. Dissension, resurrection. Death, burial, and resurrection. Descending and ascending. Ephesians 8. Wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? So we find out that the Spirit descended into the lower parts of the earth, into space, matter, and time, into emptiness and elements and measurement. He descended into those and began to take shape and take form. And then when he done that, now he that ascended was, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? And he that descended, he that dropped down into emptiness and elements and measurement and took all those things onto himself, he that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. Now when we see this and we read, we think, he that did this, and we think that was Jesus on Calvary. Well, that's fine if you want to think that. If you want to keep that idol in your mind, that's okay. But we are the he. Where do you think you were at? Were you not hanging in that body? Was that body not yours? Did you not suffer and die and get buried and resurrect and ascend? So when Paul is talking about these things, stop thinking about one person or one being, and think about all of humanity. Think about all of the universe going through this. We say Christ is within. And I was thinking about Peter, where Peter made the statement. He said when Christ died, he said he entered into the spirits in prison, and he said that he set the captive free. And I thought, okay, where did we enter? Where did we go when we descended? We descended into the earth, and then when we get here, we descend into ourselves inward. It's not like there's something inside me in here, but I am a level of consciousness. I am a conscious person, and I descend into that, or I descend into the lower parts of the earth, or I descend into my emptiness, my elements, and my measurement, and I descend into that, and I begin to form it and shape it into who I want to be. And every one of you do the same thing. So when we say Christ is, we go within what? What do you think you're going within? You're going to go within the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom? You're going to go within someplace behind the moon up there? You're going to go within the sun? Where are you going to go within? You say, well, I'll go within my own self, my own body. There's nothing in there other than organs. You got a heart and a liver and bowels and lungs and brain. You got all those things. All that is organs. There's no life in that unless you descend into that, into who you are, into your consciousness. When you descend and understand who you are, you then begin to descend within. You can dissect the human body, take each piece and part, searching for Christ, and you will never find Christ. You can do whatever you want. Ask the greatest coroner alive. Call him up and say, I got a dead body here, or I got a body here, and I'd like for you to cut it open, and I'd like you to find the spirit. You'll never find it. It's not in the body. It is a consciousness of itself that is directing, walking, and it's taken this body to be a part of its consciousness. And it is everywhere. So what is meant when we say turn within? Go within, go micro. Inside is where we will find Christ and find ourselves. We say it. When I use those cliches and you use those cliches and terms on people, what I'm speaking of is becoming conscious of yourself. That there is a collective consciousness of the Spirit. It is omnipotent, omnipresent. It's all omniscient. You just keep naming it. And you don't have to find it or go anywhere to get into it. It is everywhere. It is all things. You are it. Christ is everything, anything, all things, and everywhere. David said, if I ascend up into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. And Paul reiterated the conscious spirit of Christ as being all dimensions and all things when he said, say not in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? That is to bring Christ down from above. Paul's saying, what? You think you're going to bring Christ from up there somewhere? And get him to descend down, or you ascend up like it's some geographical place? And he goes on, he says, say not in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? That is to bring Christ down from above. Or who will descend into the deep? That is to bring Christ up again from the dead. You're going to descend in here and get Christ to come out? You're going to descend into this body? You're going to descend down into the earth? What you're descending into is dimensional things, and it's your consciousness that is alive and has always been alive. It is an eternal thing. It is an eternal being, and you are there, and you are alive and well, and you can't ascend or descend in the thinking that man thinks, like there's some geographical place and some spirit being up there that I ascend into, and some down here that I descend down into. That's not it. Who will descend into the deep? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? Where is it? The word is nigh you, even in your mouth and in your heart. That is, listen to him, the word of faith. It is faith is what we're talking about. We're not talking about a descension or an ascension in a physical manner, but we're talking about using our faith to ascend and descend and to move into things. It's our faith that takes us there. Faith is the substance. No one has went anywhere to find Christ. You're not going to have to fly up there, and you're not going to have to go down there, and you're not going to have to turn inside this body to find Christ. We are Christ. We are the very consciousness. Our individual attribute of consciousness opens. We have an individual attribute. We have a little Don Parnell, a little Latore. And that individual person, that attribute, conscious, opens to become the collective consciousness of the universe. It's not two consciousness, but it's two attributes of the conscious. And one of those attributes is to the individual, and that individual uses that conscience under the descent of law and follows the obedience of all things until it comes to where it is moving through the ascent, and it opens up your very consciousness, and you become the collective consciousness of the universe, the consciousness that's controlling all things. Don't get me wrong, you always were it, but you didn't know you were it. We said it, I don't know how many times. You can have $1 million in your pocket, but if you don't know it, it doesn't do you any good. And our consciousness, we didn't know who we were while we descended, came through law, came through loss of certainty, loss of unity. We came through all of these things not knowing or understanding and trying to believe who we were, having mediators and intercessors and everything else under the sun, having all kinds of sacrifices and works outside of us to be able to say, look, this is what I've done and it's good, therefore I'm whatever, Christian or... So we see this, our individual attribute of consciousness, or I could put it like this, a consciousness with a limit of law on it. And we see that through the descent, so we can take shape and form. And then in the ascent, all of those laws, we've risen from the dead. All of those laws, I am he that was dead, that little consciousness with a limitation of law on it. I am he that was dead, but behold, I am alive forevermore, the collective consciousness of the universe. Behold, I lifted those limitations, I finished my descent, and now I'm moving, I'm in resurrection, and I'm doing all of these things. We've come to the collective consciousness of the universe. We've come to the vast, unlimited consciousness now. Put away your old understanding of limitations and realize we are the spirit conscience of eternity. Stop thinking under law. You came through the descent. Lift those things off of you. Get rid of those limitations. Come to a unity with all things. Come to an understanding. Come to a universal collective consciousness that you can use the same consciousness that Jesus used, Moses used, Elijah used, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Adam, and all the way back through, you can step into the same consciousness and live there and work out of that consciousness. And that's how they live through you. I in you and you in me. So we've done that. We put away our old understanding of limitations. We realize we are the spirit consciousness of eternity. We've always been and always will be. And as we continue to open to this awareness, it brings us back into, it's raising our consciousness from that little consciousness of limitation and law and obedience. It's raising us to free will, unity, certainty, understanding. It's raising us into those things, and we've always been and always will be. As we continue to open to this awareness, it brings us to unity, certainty, and free will. We can do all things in Christ the Spirit. Now, in this descent, one of the scientists, which I really like reading these things, it's Arthur Young, he makes this statement. And he calls the descent, he said, so that we can apply it more than just to science, he calls the descent a fall. In the fall, speaking of the universe, in the declension, or in the dissension, or in the devolving, in the fall, it's a fall of molecules and atoms. It is the loss of original freedom. As the molecules and atoms make their fall, they lose freedom and come under limitations. Now, it's a loss of original freedom. In the fall, what do they lose? What do atoms and molecules lose during the fall? They lose free motion of one particle, and they cancel, one particle cancels out another particle's free motion. So they bind themselves to where they can't move freely in the universe. It happens it's happening by the zillions of atoms and molecules around you and me right now. It's going, I'm talking about a descent and a resurrection that's taking place now, not one that happened 2,000 years ago. So in this fall, we lose that original freedom. In the fall, free motion of one particle is canceled by the free motion of another particle. The result is an inert object loses free motion and begins to respond to exacted laws upon it. Let me put it like this. It begins to go into chaos. It begins to go into, put it in a human form, it begins to go into panic mode, and it starts banging itself against the walls everywhere. Bang, 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 back and forth. Going as far as the limit will let it take, because it had free will. It could move anywhere. It still has that consciousness. But it has pinned itself up and enveloped itself in law for a little short period of time. So now it's striking all the walls, everything that created itself around it to hold it into an obedient place. It's striking against it, striking against it. And kind of like sperm striking the egg. Millions of sperm from a man, and it just keeps striking, 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 because that sperm knows it's carrying life. And sooner or later it breaks into that membrane, into that egg, and it fertilizes. This is what atoms do. This is what molecules do. So we see this. The result is an inert object. It loses its free motion and begins to respond to exacted laws, left, right, goes out into extreme left, extreme right, extreme this, extreme that. And you know, look at everybody. Look at what's going on today. The results, an inert object losing free motion begins to respond to the exacted laws upon it. That's Arthur Young's way of explaining atoms and molecules descending to take shape in a fall. Bringing science and the universe into our understanding spiritually is what I want to do here, so that we can understand resurrection, dissension, it's never went anywhere. It's in us and it's working universally all the time. I will say this, when we speak of humanity concerning fall, you know what we always said, Adam and Eve back there, and they fell, and Adam should have known better, and Adam did this and that, and Eve, that filthy woman, she caused every death, she caused every hospital to be built, she caused every disease, and we just go on and on and on with trying to degrade the woman and make the man full of sin, so we can scream, I need a savior, I need an intermediator, I need all these things. Because you don't know how to find yourself. So here, when we speak of humanity concerning fall, we would be better served in the concept to think of a temporal loss of freedom. Not a sin, not a destruction, a temporal loss of freedom. You have to have a temporal loss of freedom in order to grow. You had the original freedom, you drop into restrictions, limitations, and you have to obey, and you bang the walls continually because you know what freedom is. But all these laws have you pinned in, and you have to have that for just a little while for growth. Growth just meaning appreciation and understanding of what you really are. And if you're never restricted, you never come to that appreciation. So we would be better served in the concept to think of a temporal loss of freedom or an increase in law and restraint. It's not a matter of I decreased, if you're willing to think properly. It's a matter of I have increased in law and restraint. And therefore, I will know all about law and restraint when I move back to free will. And I will know when I have went past that wall and how good it feels. I will know all of these things by going into a temporal loss of freedom and an increase in law and restraint. This fits the pattern of humanity and the universe. That's my thinking on it. Simply put, the fall was into restricted motion, into law and temporal restraint. That's all the fall was. It wasn't a terrible thing. We needed to understand humanity. We needed to understand what flesh is, all these things. So we had to move into that. The fall was into restricted motion and mind, rendering only enough understanding to respond in conflict to the law of the fall. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't know why I have to do this. I don't know why do I have to dress a certain way? How come I can't how come I can't wear this? Or who are you to tell me what to do? Constant conflict of this law that's all about us. We come in the conflict of the law of fall because we don't want to remain that way. It's like a little chicken inside the egg, and it just keeps pecking the wall, just going at it until it pecks itself out of its law and its restraint, and it comes to freedom. So we see this, the law of fall. These laws are predetermined, you know what I told you before, and elected. We have an elected amount of law, we have predetermined laws, and then we limit ourselves to an understanding to only be able to respond in rebellion and conflict against those walls. That's the entire process of the growth of the universe, and it's mine and your entire process of our growth, breaking out of all of these things. These laws are predetermined, elected, and enforced by the strength of the law. Now, you know what Paul said. The strength of the law is what? Sin. Sin just means to miss the mark. So, when we dropped into these restraints, we begin to push against the walls, complete rebellion, fighting to get out of those walls, and we're being enforced by the strength of the law every time we do something disobedient. Every time we rebel against it, the strength of the law, which is sin, becomes stronger and stronger. So the wall, as you're banging it and banging it and banging it, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And after you keep trying to restrict, you can't get out. You know that. We've all been in that prison house. Sin just means to miss the mark. Change your thinking about the law and about sin, and you'll not have to deal with it ever again. As we miss the mark and are conscious of doing so, we have within us the Spirit that makes a way to overcome the fall. We have a conscience knowing the law's there, and that little individual restricted consciousness has to be opened up and the law lifted off of it. And how do you lift anything off of yourself? By a change of mind. There is therefore now no condemnation to them who are in Christ Jesus. You're free from the law and from sin. Sin just means to miss the mark. As we miss the mark and are conscious of doing so, we have within us the Spirit that makes a way to overcome the fall. We have within us a Spirit. It's who we are. It's our very consciousness. And it says, don't worry about that. I removed that wall when you were hanging on Calvary. I removed that wall when you began to go through your suffering, and I removed that wall when you came to the end of your descent. I finished the descent. This conscious Spirit is telling you that on the inside. I finished the descent. I am in ascent, and you need to forget and move the law of consciousness off, or the law of sin off of you, the law of fall, and you need to move on up into the collective consciousness where there's no sin. Everything's in harmony. Everything is an exposition. Everything is perfect. How do you do that? Do you move from some geographical place to another? No. Do you move from some dimension to another? No. You change your conscience. You change your thinking. You get rid of all those restrictions, which you can do now because you died on the cross. You were buried in the tomb and you resurrected. So that was Jesus. That was me. Jesus was just a part of that. I'm a part of that too. So we have within us this Spirit that tells us we can overcome that thinking. It's just thinking is all it is. We can overcome that fall. Humanity through Christ is now free from what Anthony Young called the fall law. We're now free from it. Humanity through Christ is now free from the fall law of sin and death. We entered a growth period, a season of fall. You can't grow without it. We entered a growth period, a season of fall for our understanding and strength toward one another. And we built a strength in free will and freedom that was stronger than the strength of the law. Or we surpassed, transcended, and went beyond our sin and said, I don't have any anymore. I'm done. It's been removed. So now we are no longer, talk about a resurrection, talk about a quickening power, and I'm talking about stuff that's going on in us today. We are no longer moving within the fall and its law. So all that you ever thought about the fall And even right down to now, so many of you continually think, well, we're still in this fall. No, we are not. We are not in the fall. We are in the ascent and have been in the ascent for a long period of time. We're no longer moving within the fall of law. I cannot sin. What do you mean sin? I cannot miss the mark. Missing the mark cannot be imputed to me. Get that in your minds. If I do something that says, oh, you missed the mark there, you sinned. No, I didn't. It can't be imputed to me. What did Paul say? Blessed is the man to whom sin is not imputed. And we came to a position where the law of sin is removed, the fall law is gone. It can't be imputed to me. I can't sin. I can't miss the mark. Blessed is the person whose sin is not imputed to him or her. The body of Jesus, the earth, humanity, your body made the exit from the fall. The body you're living in right now made the exit from the fall. All together in the spilling of your blood. It cleansed the earth. And your body is no longer under a curse, no longer under a fall, no longer under genetics, no longer under the processes of DNA. All of these things, they say you're going to get certain inherited diseases. You're going to die at a certain age because your ancestors did this and your ancestors did that. And all the bacteria and all the viruses and everything else, you're going to take them on based on your ancestry and your genetics and the laws of those genetics. I am out from under every single one of them. We're no longer moving in that fall. I cannot sin. Missing the mark cannot be imputed to me. Blessed is the person whose sin is not imputed to them. The body, your body, already came through all that and resurrected. You spilled that blood. Humanity is working its way through the entanglement now. we have all kinds of trouble. We get all entangled. You remember Brother Branham? The angel told him, don't do this. He went and did it. Got his line all tangled up, messed up everywhere. The angel said, your angel said to you, what'd you do that for? You got yourself all entangled. Told him to stand there a minute. Brother Branham stood there and just kept working things out. And he said, after a while, just go read it. He said, after a while, you know what? He said, I got my line untangled. That's what you're doing right now. You are untangling yourself. You have been entangled in church age law, tradition, creed, dogma, people, idols, idol worship, men worshipers, animal worshipers, everything under the sun. You've been entangled in everything. From 13 to 19 years of age, you pretty much worshiped yourself. Because you thought you were the greatest thing in the world. Couldn't hardly take your eyes off the mirror. Every hair had to be right. Had to get that smell on you, that stuff and everything else. And you had to, oh man, you was the greatest thing ever was. They went to the mirror and worshiped yourself 2, 3, 4 times a day. Now, you get a little age on you. You get past all that, and doesn't really matter. You just want to enjoy life. So we see this. Humanity is working its way through the entanglement now of 2 laws. That's right. The law of liberty in Christ and the law of fall. We're working ourselves in this entanglement. Because the law of fall built such a web that, it's the biggest spider web I ever seen. And people just try their best to work their way through it. And seemed like some days they can get through and other days they can't. And all you really need to do is change your thinking. Change your mind. These 2 laws are working within you. But be assured, from the Spirit, there's only one law being applied. The law of liberty. So every time you think, I did this wrong, that wrong, I missed mark, I sinned, Get it out of your head. The law of fall cannot be imputed to you. That's your blessing. You're in the law of liberty. The law of liberty is what's imputed to you. We are free. Keep untangling the fall law from yourself, and you'll do it. You'll catch yourself, why did I think that? Why this? All the time, it's there. Keep untangling yourself from that law of that increase of law and restraint. Untangle yourself from it. From our very person. Just take it away. Continue to impute the law of liberty. Everything about the law of liberty. Say to yourself, that's who I am. That's what I am. That's my very actions. That's my being. That's my person. I am the law of liberty. Apply the law of liberty to your person. This removes all condemnation, and it removes the imputation of the old law. The law of fall, the law of restraint, the law, all of these things that you have had in you for years. This removes all of that. Its results are unrestricted freedom and strength of one new person. So you pass from the law of restraint and you move over into the law of liberty, and you get back your motion, you get back your freedom, you get back your free will, you get back your certainty of who you are. You begin to come to unity with the collective consciousness and break away from that little consciousness of the individual that has that restraint on it, and you go back into and open up into the law of Christ, the law of liberty, the law of freedom and no restraint. In our universe, we are doing this. We're finding it, and it's happening all the time in the universe. And you do it by a change of law. One new person comes by a change of law in your mind. You will find yourself invigorating and excited with the freedom. You'll feel it more and more and more the more you apply it, and the more you cast off and recast all of that old law. In our universe of the Spirit, atoms are single. Listen to me on this closely. I hope I explained this right. We've been talking about descent and ascent. Now, in our universe of the Spirit, which is who we are the universe. Atoms, there's atoms and there's molecules. Atoms are single. They're single, they're one unit, and cannot join with one another. One atom can't join with the other. Now you wonder why I don't really think males should be joining up with one another. Because the universe doesn't let it happen. So there's a better way of living. If you're that way, love bless you, but there's a better way of living than joining up male to male. In the universe of the Spirit, atoms are single and cannot join until they are split. And they are split by an energy of force, by vibration, by frequency, by all of those. Those are forces that split the atom. Light splits the atom. So this atom remains single, and it cannot join one another. And then once the atom is split by energy and force, once split, they can join and become many, leaving the singular. Now, how did you split? You know that you were in theophany, one being, and you dropped into humanity, and then we split the male nature and the female nature and split them and brought a dual, so to speak, atom, or an atom that's split. And then what happens when this atom is split? It can rejoin. And it can become one. The female that broke away and the male that They're split, they can become one back together again. And that is how a molecule is formed. The atom is split, and then when they are split, the male-female nature, they can come back together and they can join. An atom by itself cannot, but once it's split into male-female, it can rejoin, and that atom is a molecule. In our universe of the Spirit, molecules are not singular. In other words, molecules don't have to stay single all throughout eternity. Molecules are not singular, but are many, and act as conjunctions, combining atoms, bringing structure. A simple way to understand atoms of molecules, let me put it like this. Think of the alphabet. We all know A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. This is getting pretty simple. Think of them A by itself, B by itself, C by itself, D by itself, and right on down the line. All of them just an alphabet. Then that is an atom. Each one of those 26 are an atom. So you're looking at 26 atoms that haven't been split. Think about it that way. Each atom is a singular letter separated from the next letter. Then look at words. Jesus. It takes atom J, E, S, and U. And splits them, brings them back together in unity, and now they can be joined because they are a molecule. They'll never be an atom again. We'll never go back to that singular motion that we were at the start. You can't regain that. That's what you were. You'll always have it in your consciousness. But we moved from atoms, split, into molecules. And then we can rejoin. Male and female molecules rejoin with one another. In our universe of spirit, molecules are singular, and atoms are singular, and molecules are multiple. A letter, words. Just think about it like that, and you'll understand what's going on in the universe. Science makes it real complicated at times, but it's just that simple. Atom, split, and then rejoined into words. And and those words, look at the words formed from the single letters, and you're looking at molecules. Not a single letter. Looking at the words formed from single letters, you're looking at a molecule. A combination of atoms is molecules, and can be endless in the makeup of words. Can be endless. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It can just go forever and be endless, because once we break away from singular, we break away from separation, and we move into the molecule world or the humanity world, we can become many. The simple explanation gives us a view of the structure of humanity. Atoms singular could not produce or multiply without the force of energy to split them, the masculine. Once there is a split atom, the molecule comes into view and brings conjunction, therefore freeing humanity to become as many and as endlessly as they want. Molecule, the combination of male-female after a split. The molecular movement in the earth, or woman nature, this is what I'm talking about. The molecular movement in the earth, or woman nature, conjuncts the atom. It brings them together, combines and produces an innumerable amount of molecules, bringing structure to the molecule world, to the molecular world. right here sits an innumerable amount, holding my hands up, talking through my mouth, looking through my eyes, walking with my legs, all these things that I'm doing. Right here is an innumerable amount of molecules that started out as an atom, split from theophany down into the world, and became male, female, and then rejoined. And I'm sitting here today as a complete structured molecular structure, a person, and this is atoms and molecules going through the descent and the ascent. Now we know why the Spirit chose woman to birth humanity. The universe was already doing it throughout eternity. Atoms choosing, splitting, and choosing female, choosing woman nature to populate, to bring structure, to bring form, to bring planets, to bring stars, to bring trees, to bring the earth, to bring humans, to bring everything. It's been the universal way of life. The universe is not something that's just out there. The universe is a very being, a living being that's producing life all the time. So we see this. Now we know why the Spirit chose woman to birth humanity. Multiply and replenish the earth. Humanity is perfectly aligned with the universal spirit and how it forms every structure and everything it does. It's aligned perfectly. It's a splendid web of perfectness, beauty. And we weave it continually. And we're in continuity in every level from universe down to galaxy, down to solar system, down to planets, down to earth, down to humans, and down to botany, and down to animal, and all the way to everything is working off this resurrection, this descent and ascent. It's all working. It's never been out of cater. It's never been out of mix. If we can understand this, it's so simple. It's so simple that everything I'm doing is a reproduction of myself. Just a reproduction of myself continually. Sometimes it's beyond our comprehension for a while. That's why I reduced it to simply male and female combination. I read through it, I studied it, I looked at it, and I said, here's how it applies physically and spiritually. Here's how we bring it into our spiritual world. I reduced it simply to male-female combination and a multiplication and a replenishing, whether it is in botany, animal, humans, the universe, the galaxy, the solar system, everything operates the same way. It's the same alignment. The Spirit, the one being is bringing forth life from itself all the time. One operating in all things. The simple illustration of an alphabet helps. Letters are singular atoms, while molecules are structured, formed words. It just keeps bringing it together. You say, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with this, Brother Parnell. You've already comprehended it. You say, no, I haven't. No, I haven't. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. You were single. Theophany. And you split. That's what an atom does. You all understand you came from a theophany world into humanity. You split. You rejoined with your wife. You found the atom that you split from, you rejoined. You rejoined with your wife, and the two of you enjoined. You couldn't even do it until you split. You didn't even know it until you split. And now you can rejoin. You can enjoin yourself back together, and you did it. Multi-millions and billions of you have been doing it, and you've comprehended it, and you call it marriage. You call it oneness. You call it whatever you want to call it. It's been going on for billions of years. You comprehended it. You rejoined with your wife. You split. You rejoined. The two of you enjoined yourselves together, and it made a molecule. As a molecule, you develop the capability to be multiplied and replenish. Thus, there's your daughters and there's your sons. It's a very simple process. You will come from a single to an split to an enjoined, and now that you're enjoined, you can multiply and replenish. You can have little babies. You can have things that look just like you. You can have more atoms and more molecules, and you can just keep making it and making it. As a molecule, you develop the capability to be multiplied and replenished. Thus, your sons and daughters. And then they did the same, and your grandchildren came. And they'll do the same, continuing to replenish the molecular structure of the universe. You did it already. You were single, you become a husband or a wife, you become a mom and a dad, you become a grandma and a grandpa, you become a great-grandma and a grandpa, and it just keeps going right on down the line, and your atom that split and rejoined is multiplying in molecule all over the face of the earth. And it's doing the same in the universe with actual atoms and molecules in that form, protons and photons and neutrons and everything else. And it forms itself and it comes into all sorts of energies and everything else. And it's going on all the time. And you are going through the humanitarian process. And you've already comprehended it. Whether you believe it or not, you turned your paper in and you got an A on it. Because you followed the alignment of the universe. And you are a part of the universal being. 100%. Yay for you. It's not hard to understand. Now think of Jesus Christ. Let's go back there for a minute. You already did it. You have moved through. You are showing the same structure as the universe. It's not complicated. Let's go back to Jesus Christ for just a minute. The split at Calvary. Adam, A-T-O-M, Jesus, second Adam, went up on Calvary's hill and split. What did he split? What was in him? A male and a female. Your own prophet taught you that. Don't get scared of Don Parnell. The male and the female split. Just exactly the way an atom does to start with. And so we see Jesus Christ split at Calvary and the rejoining on the day of Pentecost. That's where the Spirit and the male and the female came back together again and rejoined themselves. And they made up a molecule. Then the molecular structure of a new creation began. Humanity is the way of the universe. The universe is a person who progressed, multiplied, replenished, and is alive and well in all things. From the amoeba to botany to the animal to the human to the earth to the solar system to the galaxy to the universe, it all enjoins and multiplies in the same manner. Jesus Christ followed the universal law and brought forth a whole new creation, and it continues to reproduce itself today. No worries, we already did it. Twice now. I did it in two different ways. I did it through my molecular structure as Don Parnell, and I reproduced Joe and Sherry and Jessica, and then came Bennett and Brianna and Allison and Colton, and I could just keep naming them right down the line, Dylan and Dalen. It's me. I'm just reproducing. Under the universal law, the same law, and then I was in Jesus Christ, and I did the same thing. I split myself. I came back a few days later on the day of Pentecost and enjoined myself with what I split from, and we changed the mix of atom to molecule, and we started reproducing throughout the entire earth. No worries. We already did it. We are the resurrection. We have come through our dissension. We have come through our death and our burial. We've come through all of these things, and we are on the ascent. We have moved back into, I cannot sin. I cannot miss the mark. I have free will. I am certain of who I am. What are we doing? We're pulling out of the descent and we're going into the ascent. And we're getting rid of all those uncertainties, all those laws, all those restrictions that you kept banging your head against, trying to get out, like the chicken out of the egg, like the atom out of the restraints in science. You've been doing that, and we broke ourselves through. Our singleness combined or connected to others, and it brought a meaningful, understandable life. We're one body now. What did he say? Sacrifices and offerings, I don't even accept them anymore. I have prepared myself a body. We did it through the universal law of life and liberty. We moved into the free will, and we have become a body of that very being that we are. We produced ourselves a body. The simplicity of this can be understood by the epitome, us, by the collective, all of us. Just look at us as an individual. Our person will be meaningless without our connection to a collective understanding of who we are. Our mingling, our attachment to our partners, our wives, our husbands, our children, our friends, our loved ones, our animals, our flowers, our birds, everything. You are moving through an attachment with them. All of this is going on, and how beautiful is this connection enforced by the energy. What energy split the atom? What force split the atom? We have been regenerated and brought back by the energy and force of love. God is love. All that I've talked about today has been love. Complete love to carry you through that living being that you are, to carry you through the processes of growth, so that you can learn to love your freedom, love your thinking, love yourself, love your mind, your heart, your soul, your being, and love everything around you. That's the connection that's moving now. That's the Aquarian age. That's the resurrection that Jesus wanted to see. That's what this day is all about. It's not about Easter eggs and bunnies and everything else, which is all fine. That's real fine. Not a thing wrong with letting the kids have a good time. But be sure they understand the resurrection and what's going on today. It's real, it's alive, and you can't get out of it. You are it. You are the universal being moving through these processes. You set yourself up with laws and restraints. You then, through disobedience, broke out of those laws and restraints. And then you come back to free will, understanding, and more growth. And then you know what will happen? Yeah, it will, because we're eternal. We'll put ourselves in some more laws and restraints somewhere in the next life, a million times in this life, whatever it might be. We do that for growth. And then we beat the walls apart until we get it all beat down, and we say, man, I'm strong. I overcome that. It gave me the strength to overcome all of that restriction, all of those walls, all of those petitions that were set up against me, all the writings and the ordinances, everything. I've defeated it. I have come to who I am. Love yourself. Know who you are. Understand the working that's going on inside you. Understand that you need to break free from that fall law. You need to break free from that restricted consciousness and come into the collective consciousness of the universal being that you came from and that you are. Love, bless. I hope everyone had a great Easter, and I hope that this has helped, and it has helped you in your understanding.